Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Music Den. I'm, of course, your host, Armando Venditti. Hoping you guys are having a good night. I'd like to welcome back to the channel, Mr. Jim Bricker. How's it going, Jim?
I'm doing very well, Armando. Thanks for having me back.
Always a pleasure to have you back. And Mr. Ken Cheshire, how's it going, Ken?
It's going well. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming back. Ladies and gentlemen, let's talk some Joni Mitchell, shall we? Specifically, the album Shadows Light. And is it the greatest live jazz rock album ever? We'll get into that. We'll see what happens at the end of this episode. Now, ladies and gentlemen, Shadows Light has been re-released in a box set format as part of the Asylum Albums collection, 1976 to 1980. And the reason why we are discussing this album in particular, and I have my copy right here. Okay. This is a part of the Asylum Albums, 1976 to 1980. There's also coming out on October the 4th, the Archives Volume 4 collection, which is a 6 CD collection of all live material. And included in that collection is some material recordings featuring Pat Metheny, Don Elias, sorry, Bad Back Guys, and Lau Mays, and also Jaco Pastorius, also featuring Michael Brecker on saxophone. So we are going to be discussing whether or not we feel if this album is indeed the greatest live jazz rock album ever. So I'll give my opinion last, of course. I'll pass the virtual mic down to, as I see on my screen, Mr. Jim Bricker, and give his opinion on this album,
Hi.
his history
I'll
with this album.
happily I'll happily give my opinion and background on it. So, um, my introduction to this album came during college, and this is not a fabrication. It was a recommendation from a bass player who took lessons from Jocko.
Really?
So my introduction to Shadows and Light is like 1 degree of separation from one of the band members, or maybe it's 2 degrees. I'm not sure how that formula works anymore.
Okay.
But yeah, not only was it my introduction to Jocko, but it was also my introduction to Joni Mitchell, at a deeper level than the singles that are on the radio. And I was already very familiar with Metheny and Mays from the Pat Metheny group, and you know for folks that haven't heard this album, it is not your typical Joni Mitchell record. This whole period from 76 to 80 is where Joni was um, really exploring jazz as part of her compositions, and how she was approaching and being inspired by music. In fact, Shadows and Light was from a 1979 tour for the album that came out at that time, which was called Mingus, which is a tribute to bass player Charles Mingus, and it's Joni setting lyrics to several of Mingus's tunes. Um, the band that they put together for this tour was put together by Jocko, who was the musical director for the whole Shadows and Light tour, and
Mhm.
that's why you've got Metheny, because Jocko and he, kind of started out together as part of a trio with Bob
Yeah.
Moses in the Boston area in like 75, 76. Um, so, at that time, Jocko was the jazz darling. And I think if he picked up the phone and made a call, probably everyone said yes.
Mhm.
Um, the thing about this band is they really they do two things. They really honor the spirit of what's going on with Joni's compositions, whether it's the stuff from this jazz era, 76 through 79, or
Yeah.
whether it's the older material as well. Case in point, Free Man in Paris. Now, Free
Yes.
Man in Paris was recorded, for Court and Spark. That was back in 73, 74, I think.
74. Yeah.
And yeah, and that's a great tune. It's life, it's bouncy, it's got great arrangements. But if you put Jocko and Pat Metheny and Lyle Mays and Michael Brecker and Don Elias as your backing band, that just takes it to a whole nother stratosphere. This
I agree.
song bops and swings harder than it does on the studio arrangement. It's just got a lot more energy and soul uh, through it. And I think because of the energy that this band provides to Joni, it kind of ups her game as well, because her voice through this whole performance is just strong. Her voice is an instrument on this album. Like
Yes.
like a jazz, player, she, messes with it. She's very elastic in how she's approaching the notes, time, um, the harmonies. It's a very gorgeous, sensitive instrument, and is definitely one of the pieces of the ensemble here.
Mhm.
Um, I fell in love with this record when I first heard it, and one of the reasons that I am looking forward so much to getting that Archives 4 box, the 6 CD set that you were talking about. Not only does it have, a bunch of studio outtakes from the sessions and rehearsals, but it's got like almost an entire Shadows and Light show from very early in the tour, like about a month before this recording from Santa Barbara. Um,
Yes.
you
Yes.
get,
Sorry, not to cut you off, but I'm about to cut you off. Sorry.
it's your show.
It's our show. But anyways, um, when I was reading the track listing from the archive set, I got very excited because I think it's from CD5 to CD6, track 7 on. It's all of the Shadows and Light tour early on. Like it's all of the songs that they recorded at the show.
Yeah,
Um,
Forest Hills, New York. Yeah.
yes, yes. And I'm reading the track listing, and I'm like, October 4th can't come soon enough for me because I want to get my hands on this sucker, and I want to listen to it. I want to drink, I want to soak it in. I want to, dive into it head first, again, without my bathing trunks and just soak everything in and just enjoy it for what it is. So, because again, as I, and then, sorry, we'll go back to what you're saying. What you hear on this album isn't all that was recorded for this tour. So you're just getting a snippet of what was recorded, right, for this album. So even with 19 songs, you're not getting the entire performance, right? So
Yeah.
that is what's
Yeah. What
exciting about it.
Yeah, there was a video that came. I'll make one more point and then I'll pass it on to someone else.
Yeah.
When Shadows and Light was released, there was also a video that was released at the same time. So
Mhm.
Joni, in her mind, very much had this as some sort of audio visual thing. And I don't know, I don't think it really came off like that so well. I mean, there's parts of, I mean, the whole album kind of starts off as like an overture, and you can hear like bits of movies and other soundtrack stuff. It's a
Yeah.
lot of kind of foreshadowing of what the whole rest of the album is going to bring. Um, the the video recording that complements it has a couple more tunes than are on the album. Raised on Robbery and Jocko's solo are there, but then there's at least three other songs that have not been released at all. Their version of Big Yellow Taxi, Just Like This Train, and then The Last Time I Saw Richard, which if my ears
Mhm.
hear right, it's the only tune that's like a Lyle Mays solo tune. So it's just Joni and Lyle, I think. It might be, like I've never seen a recording of it, so maybe Joni on the piano. I would be a little surprised, because I think, through the whole of the rest of the concert, Joni's either on her guitar or just doing vocals. So
Yeah.
anyway, I'm looking forward to having this mammoth box in my hands, just like the other three. I mean, they're absolutely gorgeous, beautiful sets, and really looking forward to hearing the whole thing. I could go on and on, but I'm going to curtail it for a while and let someone else make a point or three.
Or four. All right, Ken, your views.
I first discovered this album about 30 years ago. I didn't realize that um, Matheny, Mays, and Pastoris were played on it. And once I discovered that, well, yeah, I couldn't grab a copy fast enough. I echo everything, Jim just said. Some of the things that have always struck me is I like the fact that it's a small ensemble. They don't have a horn section. It's just the six of them. And I really, that to me, that gives it more of an intimate feeling. Um, and it also gives opportunity to um, focus a little bit more on each of the instruments, each of the members. And I
Yeah.
really do look forward to hearing it off of the upcoming box set, like you two have mentioned. Um, this is an album that I'm not an expert on Joni like Jim is, and so this album is something that I just yeah. Uh, that
No, no.
I just put on while I'm doing something or just chill out. This is the
Mhm.
first time I've ever really gone through specifically track by track and analyzing it. And so in a way it's like listening to it for the first time. So I've been listening to it about maybe three times over the last 24 hours. So yeah. Um, but that's generally my take on the album. I have a few issues with it, which we'll get into, as we go through the tracks. To me, it's not a perfect album, but it's an amazing album nonetheless. And I specifically echo what you said about Joni's voice. It is absolutely spot on every single time.
Sweet
Um,
Jesus.
it
Yeah.
it doesn't waver in pitch. It's full tone. It's just there are artists that would just love to be able to sing that good consistently. So
Right.
yeah, that's the standout of this album for me is her voice.
Can I throw a couple of things in there based on what you
Throw
said?
it, throw it.
Your comment there about Joni's voice, to me, the version of Woodstock that's on this album is kind of the grand testament to that, because she's not just doing it by the numbers.
Right.
Again, you're the music expert here. I don't know if she's reharmonizing things, shifting the melody, but it's got kind of this thicker jazz feel than, her original version or the Crosby, Stills, Nash version. I
Yeah.
don't know if she
Yeah.
shifted it to a minor key here or there. I'm not sure what's going on, but there's a lot more searching and yearning in this version than anything. And the way that she's handling the notes is a huge part of that.
Yeah. I really don't associate her version of it to the Crosby, Stills, Nash version. They're
Right.
two different animals to me. They really
No,
are.
Mhm.
no. I think that she altered it to fit the type of music that was played like throughout the entire night. To switch it
Oh yeah.
to more of a jazz type of a situation in order to keep it in line with what was played before during the night. I mean, I'll give you my history with this album, which is this. I didn't discover this album until I moved here in 2010. And prior to moving here from Toronto, I'm always in search of something new to listen to and to get into and to enjoy. And Joni Mitchell's music came to me at a point where I desperately needed something different to listen to, just to dive into a different genre. The albums Hajira, especially, which is included in the set, ladies and gentlemen, of the Asylum years 76 to 80. That album to me specifically is just simply gorgeous. There's no way around it. There's no way around it. And I mean, to me, she dove into more of a jazz fusion, uh, you know, arena with the hissing of summer lawns.
Yes. Yeah.
And
Sure.
as a side note, that was Prince's favorite album from hers.
Was it that or was it Don Juan? Because I thought Paprika Plains was his to die
I
for song.
I do remember reading that Prince had stated that when he heard the hissing of summer lawns, he fell for it, hook, line, and sinker. He
Okay.
was always a fan of female vocalists, Christine McVie, Stevie Nicks, Joni Mitchell. He always said that Joni Mitchell had a lot of color in her music,
Hmm.
a lot of tones, different colors, different shades. Uh, you know, no pun intended with the album title. But yeah, and I bought this album when I came to Edmonton. I went on a shopping spree with Bob, and I literally walked out of there with like 10 albums um, in one shopping trip, and I just dove into this. And I wanted, I dove into it blindly, not knowing what it was going to be about, not knowing who played on the album, and I think it's just fantastic, fantastic. Um, that being said, there is one caveat that after listening to it after for a few years and a few times, I would make one change, but we'll get into that in a second as we go on through this episode. Um, I will say I have this on on vinyl. I have this on standard double CD, and I have this in this version right here. So I am a collector. And I was listening to this album over the weekend, and I do think it's fantastic with one caveat, actually two caveats that we'll get into. So I will pass the virtual mic back down to Jim so he can give his more of his insights into this album.
Okay. Well, I think I mentioned how, the players bring a completely new level of energy and, you know, swing and just bop to this whole thing. Not that the whole thing is a swing and bop album, but jazz players just have this way of working with rhythm. It's just sort of inherent in them about how they play around it, and they're not staying, solid with the four.
Yeah,
There's no click track in their head,
no,
and if they do, they know how to mess with it and work around it. Um, this is not a heavy blowing jazz album. It's I would call this like it's jazz augmented folk rock, and the augmentation comes from how the players are approaching things, how it's arranged. One of the comments that you were making, Ken, about the arrangement and the six players, one of the things that I really appreciate about this album is the I'll say the economy of the arrangements. For example, Mike Brecker is in the band, but there's only like a quarter of the songs that have saxophone. So it's like just because Joni has all these people in her band, they're not in the forefront or even a part of every song.
hmm
So
I would agree.
she and Jocko really are using the power of the instrumentalists very judiciously to augment what's going on in the song. So if there are people out there who are, familiar with Joni, don't know about this album, have maybe heard that it's, got a jazz flavor to it and are kind of repulsed because they're because their impression of jazz, it's a bunch of uninvited guests who are just sort of making a bunch of noise and not following a melody and whatnot. I would say that this album is very atypical from that. The playing is top notch, but everyone is doing what is perfectly right for the track in question.
Mhm.
um you know some songs are standard drums. Some songs Don Elias has brushes going on. There are some songs where he's not on the drums at all and he's on congas. There are some times where there's no percussion whatsoever. So even Jocko, who's the musical director, is not on every song. Again, so there's
Mhm.
a real economy and wisdom that goes into each one of these songs. Side two of the album for me is a perfect example where of just all the variety and just wonder that this album has. So side two, back in, when Armando first bought it, that would be Dry Cleaner from Des Moines, Amelia, Pat Solo, and Hajira, which to me, this is like the towering achievement of this album is side
Mhm.
two. It's just brilliant.
Mhm.
The only part of side two that you could probably really call, the two parts of side two that you really call jazz are this, I'll call it this cage match battle that Jocko and Michael Brecker have in Dry Cleaner from Des Moines, where it's basically Jocko Brecker and Don Elias on drums and Joni's voice singing over it. And Brecker has this amazing solo going on, and Jocko's just got these machine gun bursts of this two note just bass figure just going throughout, which
Very
you know
precision
it
type of play.
is it's absolute precision. It's like, how can one person be doing this? And he's
Mhm.
just going and going and
Yeah.
going, and I think you could hear it sort of push Brecker forward too, and just really amping up his game. Pat's solo is the other kind of jazz part of side two of the album, and it's not even really a solo. It's Pat playing lead and improvising as only Pat can do, but Lyle Mays lays down this keyboard Oberheim foundation to it, and it's really sensitive and delicate, and again kind of pushes Matheny forward in what he's playing, and it just shows the amazing telepathy that those people had together. Pat and
Yeah,
Lyle
of
were
course.
just,
Yeah.
they were just like this. And that this 3 minute piece is, kind of like exhibit A of how just wonderful they
Hmm.
were together.
Hmm.
And Amelia and Hajira, those might be two of Joni's greatest songs. And that this is in a catalog of, great songs. Free Man in Paris, A Case of You, both sides now.
Hmm.
Hajira and Amelia are right up there. Um, especially just some of the lines, that just kill me every time I hear this Amelia. Joni singing about the hexagram of the heavens, the road leads cursed and charmed, um, strange pillows of my wanderlust. I mean, it's just fantastic lyrics, and it's why Joni is one of the greatest ever, just because she's just got such an exquisite way with words. And again, this band complements and heightens Joni's lyrics and poetry into a whole other echelon that no other band could really do with her.
Yeah.
Well, I would argue that Goodbye Pork Pie Hat fits in and makes that a trilogy. It's not quite as hard hitting as Dry Cleaner,
Yep.
but it's much more than what came before
Oh
and
yeah.
and what
Hmm.
comes later. And of course, both of those are Mingus songs. So it kind of only makes sense. Plus, Matheny and Mays had been working together for a little while. I think the first Pat Metheny group was what, a year before, maybe 2 years before.
Yeah, Watercolors was 77, and I
Yeah.
think they were started to play together in 76.
Yeah, the actual yeah. So and especially um I picked up on that and suspected it was about the same time because uh Pat's guitar sound is
Yeah.
very much like those two albums. That's before he
Right.
got into the guitar synth.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
and I remember it startled me the first time I listened to it on in France they kiss on Main Street when you get to 2 minutes and 57 seconds and you get that 4 beats of the phase dance riff.
Yes.
And it's just like,
The hit parade.
wait a minute, wait a minute. But it was only 4 beat, only one measure. And then they
Yep.
went on. So it's almost like an Easter egg on that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. This album, I understand what you're saying about the not everyone's in the front of the mix or even playing at all times. Sometimes though, I wish that some of the songs were a little bit more filled out with some of the other instruments. Um, I just felt like I was the only instrument that's consistent, of course, is Joni's guitar, and which she does a wonderful job,
Yeah.
obviously. And therein there is a reason why no one else is playing on Woodstock.
Right.
She definitely, just like Armando says, definitely doing that in the spirit of the jazz period that she
Yeah.
was in.
Mhm.
Yeah, they could have had everyone playing and they rehearsed it. The whole group could have rehearsed it more of a jazz style, but with
Hmm.
it just her and the guitar, she could do whatever she wanted. And I wouldn't be surprised that it wouldn't have been a little bit different every night. She
I
wouldn't have
guess
done.
we'll find out with the box
Yeah,
set.
I know, and that's one of the several reasons I'm looking forward to hearing that. Um, Overall, Jocko's bass is particularly hot in the mix. Um,
Hmm.
Yeah. It is
I find that in the mix there is I can't tell if on some of the songs Matheny and Mays aren't playing at all, or if they're just mixed real low.
Hmm.
It's hard to tell um, because the for the most part, Jocko's bass is so hot in the mix. It doesn't sound um, and that's another and all these are just more reasons I want to listen to the box set because there's like you said, not everyone's playing on every song, and
Yeah.
I would have liked to have heard what particularly what Mays could have brought to some of the other songs, to some of the
Yeah.
songs that I can't hear him on, because my gosh, when he is there, it's
He's there.
incredible. It's
He's there.
absolutely incredible. And
Yeah.
on Shadows and Light, it's just
Oh,
uh
that's the
him and her.
orchestrations are phenomenal.
It's just him and her. That's it with
Well, and the
with
persuasions on the
the
background vocals.
persuasions, yeah. Uh, um and it's just except for the fact that the persuasions are out of tune, out of pitch, um, to my ear.
Yeah,
See, I
I
wouldn't
didn't
have
It
catch
picked,
that, so
sounds
I wouldn't have
I
picked up
take
on
you on
that.
that.
I wouldn't have
it
picked up
sounds
on that.
very rough. Yeah, this sounds very rough. But then in 78 they weren't spring chickens anymore, so
L-
there you go.
Let me
And
put let me just put this question out there. Do you think the persuasions were necessary for this?
I don't know
To both of you.
if they were necessary, but personally I could have done without them.
Yeah.
Why do fools fall in love? I think it's um I don't always let it play through. I skip it sometimes. But you
Yeah, I
see
mean, Joni has a
that,
real soft spot for that style of music,
sure.
for
Oh yeah.
doo-wop and whatnot.
Oh
So
yeah, because that's her generation.
All I'm gonna
But
yeah.
say is,
the thing
there's the
is
rub.
on that style of a song, um, any intonation problems that the Persuasions would have would be covered because of the style of the song and what it required vocally. But on the
Hmm.
Shadows and Light, it was just too exposed, and
Hmm.
um, and to me, it just it doesn't ruin the song, but yeah, it was very noticeable from the first time I heard it, and it doesn't get any better whether I'm listening on speakers or headphones.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
me. That's me.
I'm sorry. I'm just going to finish my point in that this is where my two caveats come in. One, as good as this album is, like, first of all, okay, like to have this pedigree of musicianship on this album is stellar. Okay, is
Yeah.
phenomenal. Don Elias on percussion and drums, Michael Brecker on sax, Lau Mays on keys, Pat Metheny on guitar, Jaco Pastorius on bass. Are you freaking kidding me here? Like, are you kidding me here? Okay. This is the kind of show where I played it for Bob in the van one day. We're playing, listening to it. And he said, it's good. It's a subdued show. It's not your typical live album per se. To me, this is the type of show where you go see on a hot summer night, on a Saturday night. Personally, for me, I love concerts on a Friday and Saturday night. You go, you sit back, you relax, you enjoy. You sit on the lawn if you can sit on the lawn, and you just sit there and enjoy and take it in. It's not flash and dash. It's not smoke bombs going off. It's not strobe lights in your face. And you know what? You don't need that.
No, you don't.
The music is in the forefront. You don't need the flash and dash. The music is in the forefront. To me, to my untrained ear, the separation of the instruments is just beautiful. Okay. And she's in control. It's not, okay, Pat's going to take a solo, he's going to take over the show, or Don's going to take a solo, he's going to take over the show, or Jocko. It's all Joni Mitchell. And they defer to her, in that respect. The two caveats that I have: one, why do fools fall in love? No, it's no, no. If there is one pimple on the butt of this album, it is that. She could have put in Raised on Robbery. That would
Yep.
have fit in with the rest of what was going on the album.
Hmm.
Or Twisted, her version of Twisted. Let's just say, right? If that was even in the even to think of being in the set list.
No.
But do you know what I mean? Like one of those two songs or another song from my catalog of an original track that would have fit in better than with Why Do Fools Fall in Love? I'm sorry.
Hmm.
And the other caveat for me, Jocko's solo.
The fact that it's not on the album.
Exactly. Where is it?
Okay.
Where the hell is it? You've got you've got
I
Pat
wondered.
solo,
You've
but
got Pat's, you've got Don's.
yeah, where's Jocko's? I mean,
I think I know the answer to that. I think Don solo, well, Pat's solo certainly is an integral link between Amelia and Hejira. If you were to
exactly.
take out Pat's solo, you almost couldn't have those other tunes because
No,
they
they wouldn't have
worked
been
as like a
able.
trilogy, you
Yeah,
know.
there wouldn't have been that segue. into
Right.
it. Right. Yeah.
Now, the original CD release, and guys, check me on this. When they originally released Shadows and Light on CD, it was a one disc affair, and I
That's
think
right.
in order to do that, they took out a few tunes, and I think one of them was Don Solo, the other one was like Black Crow for some crazy reason.
Yeah.
Um, and so you could live with Dreamland just starting dead on, boom 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 boom. I mean, that's fine. You don't need Don Solo going into it.
Yeah.
My guess is that in order to keep things to 80 minutes, Jocko Solo being a piece kind of unto itself and didn't really connect one thing to another, it probably made it a lot easier to kind of say, yeah, we can do without that.
Mhm.
That's my guess.
I get what you're saying. I understand what you're saying. I'm just saying I want to hear everything.
Oh,
You
and thank God we have the big box coming out in October, which will have that back in there. And I should state that on the video release of Shadows and Light when that came out back in 80, it
there,
did have
there,
Jocko
there
solo.
is the solo because I've seen it. I've seen the
Yeah.
video. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm
And
just saying, yeah.
yeah, Jocko Solo is very, very visual. I mean, you were talking about you don't need like smoke bombs and whatnot and fireworks. Well, Jocko provides the fireworks and the smoke bombs because of his playing,
Oh my
whether it's
God, yeah.
watching him do this stuff or just listening to it. I mean, you were making a great point, Ken, about how Jocko is so hot in the mix. And, for many of the songs, it almost feels like Jocko is playing lead and Joni is handling the rhythm part. And
Yeah.
that's not, I don't think that's bad unless for some reason, like someone can't stand how Jocko plays bass or they get tired of the, harmonics that he does here and there.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I don't mean to sound like it's bad. It just seemed
Mhm.
um, more than the other instruments.
So
Except
it's
for
out of
there's a
balance.
few times when in a song, Pat will come in on, a break in between a verse or whatever, and it's like
Hmm.
it's there. You can't miss it.
Right.
Um, but with Jocko's playing style, I used to have the video too. So and I've watched every Jocko video I could find on YouTube. But I'm not quite so disappointed. I would rather have Jocko's solo than Why Do Fools Fall in Love on this. But it's not such a big deal for me because you can hear so much of what he does. Because so much of what he's playing on these songs are of solo level. He's
Yeah.
playing
I would
um
agree.
he's unlike a lot of other bass players, he's actually playing chords, which is what, the guitar and keyboards do. Bass players usually
Hmm.
play one note at a
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
He's playing full chords and is all over the place with chimes and all this other.
Hmm.
And I love it. I love it. I just kind of wanted a little bit more of the others too. But,
Sure.
you know, um, it like I said, it's a phenomenal album. It's just, I just have, just those couple of caveats. So
Those are some good caveats. I guess for
yeah,
me, I don't mind Why Do Fools Fall in Love because it's almost like a palate cleanser. It's so different from everything else on the album. It just kind of provides kind of like a nice, touch. It's almost like, something that you would get as part of a very elegant meal that's a bridge between courses. It's something it's literally a palate cleanser. I mean, Ken, you're the one with the master's degree in choral music, so yes, you would hear where the vocals are off pitch and whatnot. And I know I didn't hear any of that, but it's I don't mind it so much. I think it works within the context of the album. But yeah, I'd also be inclined to skip it if I wasn't in the mood for
yeah,
you know early '60s doo wop.
yeah,
Yeah. I feel that if you would have replaced that with another original track, another original composition, like Raised on Robbery,
Hmm.
it would have made it the perfect Joni Mitchell live album for me.
Hmm.
Do you know
Yeah.
what I mean? As good as the album is, and it is a fantastic album, it just would have put it over the top.
Yeah.
Um, and as much as I'm just gonna put this in there, as much as they let Joni lead in terms of it is her show, right? She
Yeah.
will also let the musicians lead as well, like take a solo here and there, right? Like
Hmm.
there's a lot of space and sparseness in terms of the arrangements on the album, right? Like I said, in terms of the separation of the instruments, I think it's fantastic in that respect. Um, and I am
Yeah.
looking forward to the archive set coming out. I am really looking forward to that. I can't wait to get my hands on that sucker, because it's gonna be amazing, and it's made me want to dive into the other archive set too as well, like look into them and
The other three archive sets, Armando, I can highly recommend. I mean, not to derail us too much, but there's, you know, from like the very earliest demos that she cut to live tracks that have never surfaced before. There's recording that she did in this tiny club in Canada. I'll say it's Toronto,
Mhm.
that Jimi Hendrix recorded because he wanted to capture Joni's playing. There's,
Yeah,
her
yeah,
and James Taylor doing duets. There's all kinds of like
yeah,
studio sketches and, you know, different arrangements of tunes on piano and whatnot. So
yeah.
I highly recommend all three of the archives. The entire series is worth every penny.
I'll dive into it. I definitely will. But getting
I don't
back
mean to
to,
make you spend more money, my friend. I really
oh,
don't.
yes, you do. Yes, you do. And I thank you for it. I'm good at doing that. No, but getting back to Shadows and Light, I mean, I would say that this is a very underrated album. When it was released, with the original release reached number 83 on the Canadian charts. It didn't do that well. It got pretty much a lukewarm response from the critics and from, in terms of chart positions. And which is a shame. It's an out and out shame because this album, with one or two of its foibles, I think it is a fantastic album.
Oh yeah.
You
Oh
know,
yeah.
you know.
It ain't perfect.
No,
But for, for the tracks where things are firing on all cylinders, you know, you're at like warp speed 9. I mean, it's just as it really I I'm a of course I'm a huge Matheny head. We all are. I may be the most Matheny head of us, of
Mhm.
all of us. You know, I think this is one of his all-time greatest solos is on this album, which is In France They Kiss on Main Street. I mean, there's just such a lyrical beauty and economy to his playing. It has all
Fluidity.
these great the highs and lows just working perfectly. Um, it's and of course we were talking about Jocko's playing. Brecker's playing is absolutely amazing
Yeah.
on this album too. So album is kind of like a highlight reel, not only of Joni, but of Jocko, Pat, Brecker. I mean, if people want to hear like some of the greatest jazz musicians of the late 70s live, this sucker is the place to be. And
Well,
you
yeah,
know, and and,
sorry,
and
go
it's
ahead.
approachable, you know.
It is. You also, I remember when you said early on that, she uses each musician judiciously. I support that because I mean, you don't always need a horn section on a song, right?
Right.
She uses the musicians in a way that she feels suits the song,
Yeah.
Sure.
right? I mean, and complements the song, right? I mean, you don't always need, as Jim's hair is flying in the wind, you don't always need you don't always need um all six people or all 10 people on stage to do a song that only requires, it's like having Songbird from Fleetwood Mac, right?
Oh, sure. Yeah, that's a
With a
that's a
whole,
great analogy.
with a horn section, or you know, you don't need it with Jocko doing one of his bass lines or bass runs. You don't need that. All you need with Songbird is the piano and Christine McVie's beautiful voice, like butter. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So I think that she uses the musicians on this album beautifully. Just the right touch, right?
I agree. The song Amelia is another great example of that, where it's basically just Joni solo with Pat providing some textures and stuff in the background, and then Lyle comes in with some very, very subtle textures towards the end as it's going
Yeah.
into Pat's solo. And yeah, you would think that, well, geez, I've got Jaco Pastorius in my band and Michael Brecker. I want to use them every chance that I got. And I wish I knew whether it's Joni or Jocko or a combination of both that said, let's make sure that we use things, judiciously on what's going to be in service of the song, because there would be this temptation. Well, I'm already paying Michael Brecker to be here. Why don't I have him out here on every tune, just going ape? Because not every song needs it. That's the point that you're making, Armando.
Yeah.
But
And I
that's it.
totally agree
Yeah.
with
I
that.
mean,
Yeah.
there is such a thing as less is more, right?
Hmm.
And this is a case of, again, this whole album, as beautiful and as lavish as it is, and as exquisite as it is in terms of the production on it, there is a case of for heroes of less is more. And it's done beautifully, with the exception of Wild Fool Swan Love. I'm sorry, I gotta say that. And I'm
Yeah,
sorry. I
it's a
mean,
valid point.
it's the one pimple on this album that needs to be popped. I'm sorry, in terms of, like, you could have removed that and put in another. Okay, you know my opinion on that. But I mean, what is here is platinum, in my opinion. Okay,
Yeah.
I mean, I I'm one for I'm one for images, and I could see there's a venue in Toronto called I don't know if it's still going, but it's called the Molson Amphitheater, where it's an outdoor venue, right?
Yep.
And I could see this show being performed at the amphitheater, okay?
Yeah.
On a beautiful summer night, people are sitting on the lawn, and this show is being done, and you're just enjoying it. It's a beautiful summer night again. There's a nice warm breeze coming in off the lake, and you're just wrapped up in the music, and you're taken away. Okay.
Yep.
Again, no smoke bombs going off, no strobe lights, no lasers and all that kind of stuff. It fits right in with it, and it's beautiful. It is simply beautiful. And getting back to Amelia, Amelia was what got me into Joni Mitchell
Okay.
in terms of the jazz fusion part that she got into. I mean, I knew of her other hits, but Amelia was the track from Hygeria that really pulled me in. It's the guitar work, it's the textures, it's the sparseness even of the playing, that it's just like, my God, what am I hearing here? It actually brought me to tears.
Yeah.
It brought me to tears. And I thought, I gotta get more. I gotta, there's gotta be more of this that I want to
Give
hear.
me more. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's my favorite song off the album,
Yeah.
personally.
Yeah. I mean, and there's Coyote as well, and other songs like Song for Sharon, and even the title track. But Amelia just like pulled me right in, and I'm all the better for it. Enough of my tangent, but there you go.
Yeah.
Um, anyways, any more points to make, or?
I was going to say, do we have a an opinion on where we think this lives in the jazz rock live canon?
I'll let you go first. I defer to you.
Defer to me. Um, I I can categorically say that I have not heard every live jazz rock album that exists. So, hand to God, I have
I
not.
don't believe
How?
that.
I don't believe it either. You're so well versed. in music.
However, um, with those I have heard, and we'll count, of that time, Weather Report, Herbie Hancock, Return to Forever, different bands that are out there, um, in the very late 70s. I think this takes the cake. And I think the reason that takes the cake is because of the judiciousness that was applied to these songs, as well as the, phenomenal playing that's on there. I mean, the phenomenal playing is a given, but the fact that they had the restraint to know, it's kind of like when you're in battle, you need to use the right weapon at the right time in order to achieve the objective, you know. And just to reiterate kind of what we said before, Jocko and Brecker are potent weapons, but if you use them too much, it ruins the effect. And I think the arrangements on this album are just so beautifully done, beautifully thought out, that the reason why I think this is the top for me is that it's approachable. And I know I used that word a few times before, but I think this is a way for a non-jazz fan to begin to appreciate the vocabulary of jazz, because they're not like in full-on assault of, like, Weather Report style jazz the whole time, or Hancock's, Headhunters. Um, it's a gateway in, and the jazz influenced, rock and folk compositions of Joni really provide a great canvas for that. I can think of, two or three people on Twitter who are not huge jazz fans, but I kind of want to serve this up and say, try this. Maybe this can be the Trojan horse, which helps you kind of understand and, get an appreciation for the genre that you may not have been able to before. So for me, that's why it could be number one.
Okay. Okay. Ken, your opinion?
I don't know. I think the trick is labeling it jazz rock as opposed to um, a live jazz album. And to me this almost feels like more folk jazz than jazz rock. Um, I think it's I think the accessibility lies in the variety of songs that are on here, of course. It does have a couple of her radio hits that people can associate with, but then it's got two Killer Mingus tracks on it also, and then the other tracks from Hijiro, which um, I would hope that would have drawn more attention um, to that album. And after hearing this, people would have gone out and bought Hajira.
Did for me.
Uh, I don't know. This
Well,
album is so
sorry, go ahead.
unique.
Mhm.
For me, the album is so unique. It's almost I find it hard to compare, to what I consider jazz rock. Um, but yeah, it's just such a unique masterpiece that to me, it's just kind of, it's in its own category. I'm sure there are other albums that would kind of fit into the same category, but I can't think of any, at least not off the top of my head. Um, but just in general, if you want to call it, jazz pop, yeah, at least, if not number one, probably easily maybe within the top five. So I haven't really thought of this in that way as far as rating it. But it's a classic for a reason, and that's undeniable to me.
Okay, Ken, thanks for your opinion on the album. I'm about to give my 5 cents, twice the amount of 2 cents, but there you go. My opinion on the album is that I think that this recording is a good cross between the work she did on the Mingus album and her folk pop albums that she did from 74 on. I wouldn't call this a jazz rock album. I would call it a jazz pop album. I think it's a good hybrid between the two mediums, uh, musical styles. Again, it's got to be said, the musicianship on this album is stellar, and the quality of the playing is just phenomenal, right? I think that she has brought both worlds together beautifully on this album. And, with the work she did on the Mingus album, it's got to be said too. Charles Mingus contacted her, from what I've read, about putting music to his works, to his writing. It was all his idea. So the fact that she was able to do an album like Mingus and make it credible and make it work speaks volumes to her willingness to dive into this world and make it her own. I think that this album, I mean, as I show it again, forgive my stubby little fingers, guys, but there you go. I think this album being released in 1980, I think this was a good way to cap off the 70s for her, the work that she did in the 70s, right? From 74 on. I think it's a fantastic snapshot of where she was at the time. And, you know, is it the greatest live jazz rock album ever? No. No, if I was to give this a rating out of 100, I'd give it 99.2. And
Okay.
Fair enough.
The reason
Fair
for
enough,
that is the 2 points I made previously. Why do
The
fools
one
fall in
pimple.
love? Why do fools fall in love? And I want Jocko's solo. I want it all, and I want it now. I'm sorry. I wanted all on the album, and it could have been put on the album. It could have been put on the album. If it meant doing a triple album, what would have been the issue? Okay.
It wouldn't have
Al-
sold as much. That's my thing.
but this album was released still at a time when that was done. I mean, where triple
Yeah.
albums were still released. And I mean, hell, if they released a triple album of Thank God It's Friday, the soundtrack, okay, why in the hell couldn't they released a triple version of this if it necessitated it to put on the entire show on vinyl? Why not? I mean, it doesn't make any sense to me. Why are you keeping such gems as Raised on Robbery and Jocko Solo in the can, or relegated it to a video release? What the hell are you doing? This
Yeah.
is a piece of platinum here. This is perfection minus those two quirks. But that's my opinion on it. I think it
Well,
could have been.
the commonality that I hear from all of us is that the playing on this album, and I think you said it, precisely, it's stellar, Armando.
Yeah.
I mean, absolutely stellar. And, it's, I called it jazz rock. Ken, you called it jazz folk. Armando, you called it jazz pop. I mean, yes, all of those things are true, and that's because Joni's abilities as a composer and an arranger working with Jocko just broke all these boundaries down. It's almost like Joni is a genre unto herself at
Yes.
this point. Very difficult to pigeonhole her. The one question I would ask, and I'm doing a little bit of a pointed stick at you, Mr. Venditti, about this. Do you know of a better jazz rock album or something that's comparable? or jazz pop, or jazz folk live. I guess I'd extend that to you as well, just to put you on the spot.
I have not listened to a lot of live jazz pop oriented albums. I will grant you that.
Mm-hmm.
I just think that, in all honesty, she had the opportunity with the caliber of musicians that she had working with her. I'm not saying for her, I'm saying with her.
That's a good distinction. Yeah.
The caliber of musicians that she had working with her. Okay. She had the opportunity to release an album that from start to finish would have had a fluidity and a seamlessness that could have put this album over the top for me.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It's the fact that she went the doo-wop route, in terms of Why Do Fools Fall in Love. No, I mean, it just to me, it just stands out as the one outlier on the album that had you just replaced it with another original track, it would have put it over the top for me. And I mean, for me, I usually don't I don't specify in terms of what's a jazz album, what's a pop album, what's a rock album. I know what I like musically, and I don't care if it's waltz, if it's in a 3/4 time. I don't give a shit. If it moves me, then I will listen to it. And this album moved me with that one exception. It's just
Mm-hmm.
it move. It's and I've always thought that. I've always thought, okay, all right, here we go. Want to do First One Love? Okay. When I have to look at my watch, okay, when is this over? I'm done. It's like there's no point to it. But that wasn't obviously my call to make.
I can't swear it, but I think there's a Manhattan Transfer live album. I want to say it's recorded at Ronnie Scott's. I can't swear to that though.
I think
That really does fall into the jazz pop because
Mhm.
I've always liked Manhattan Transfer. Their sound and their variety as far as light jazz and some of the heavier stuff too has been wonderful. But I can't think of the name of it or promise that I'm remembering it correctly. But that's the only other thing that comes to mind off the top of my head.
All right.
Okay. No,
Yeah,
good discussion,
no,
Joe.
that's a
Good
good question.
No, it was a good question. Thank you for putting us on the spot there. No problem. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I believe
You
we've
handled
come.
yourselves with aplomb, gentlemen.
This album is on YouTube and streaming platforms. Everybody give it a shot. You
Please.
have nothing to
And
lose but a few minutes.
exactly. You can stream it on YouTube and other platforms, obviously. And once you have, please let us know what you think of Shadows
Please.
Light.
Yeah.
Please. We want to get a dialogue going. And you know what? Again, we don't know everything there is to know about music, except maybe for Ken. But
Yeah, except for Ken.
except for Ken, as he rolls his eyes. But again, this is just our opinion. Again, we'd like to know what your opinion is. Do you think Shadows and Light by Joni Mitchell is the greatest ever live jazz rock album or jazz pop album or jazz folk album ever made? I mean,
And if it ain't, what is?
What
What are we
is?
missing?
exactly. What is your pick for the greatest live jazz rock or jazz pop or jazz folk album ever?
Because we want to hear new stuff too.
Exactly. Exactly. So, in closing, I'd like to thank Ken and Jim for joining me on this, again, extended edition of an episode. And ladies and gentlemen, I want to apologize, a little side note, a little caveat here. I want to apologize for my errors that I made at the beginning of the show. It's been a long day. I've been going for tests for health reasons, and I flubbed when I should have been more professional. So I do apologize for that. So for Jim and Ken, I'm Armando. Please, let us know your opinions down below in the comments below. And click like and subscribe and hit the notification bell to keep yourselves on top of any new content that I've got coming up. Again, I flubbed. We have more shows that we're gonna, bring to you as soon as we can. All right. Please look after yourselves and one another, and we'll see you soon with another episode. Bye for now.